My father is a heavy smoker. We actually call him the chimney of our house.
The what?
The chimney, because he smokes so much, subhanAllah. How do I respectfully tell him to stop? Whenever I do tell him, he gets angry.
So a man who was addicted to smoking, the Imam told him, if you stop smoking, you'll live longer and things will be okay. He said, I can't, I love cigarettes too much. So the Imam said, you can have anything in Jannah, just give up smoking. The man said, anything? He said, yeah. He said, can I have a cigarette in Jannah? The Imam said, yes, but to light it, you have to go to the other side. And if you didn't get that, I'll be waiting outside to inshallah help you out with the explanation. Because it's a money back guarantee. If you don't get something in the convention, we want to help you out. Tweet the right things, right? So here, Abu, uncle, Ammu, Khalu, who's smoking, part of the issue here is that it becomes an addiction, by the way, if you look at the definition of it, is essentially something that starts to create in you a sort of a feeling of either satisfaction or contentment, but gradually you need more of it, more of it, more of it, and then you can't live without it, right? People say, oh, I'm addicted to coffee, can't start my day without coffee, right? I live on water, because I know in this travel, you're not going to get what you need, and you still have to keep moving. So what's it going to be? For this particular situation, the fact that you raised the issue that your father has a problem with smoking isn't in and of itself the biggest form of a dua that you could be making. You're trying to get help. But in these conferences, that's not the way to do it. It's better to do it also as a follow-up in the community where you're at. So for example, you may begin by talking to your father about when he first started smoking, to reflect on the habit. And he may start to realize, wow, what is that? Like, you're not attacking him. You're not saying, look at my clothes smell like this or that, or you're the chimney, what do they call it? Chimney of the house? The chimney of the house. I hope you're like far away from him when you say those things like that, right? Because someone who's addicted doesn't tolerate this type of stuff, right? And then begin to create a sense of acknowledgement that when did he do it? And believe it or not, it may be that it wasn't that he wanted to do it. Everybody else around him was doing it. For the longest time, the international airlines, people used to smoke on the planes. I don't know if you know that. They were so addicted, they couldn't get off of it. They couldn't get off of it. So get him to at least start talking about it. If you find a lot of resistance, then it's better to look at it from a health point of view. And if he's especially 45 and 50 and above, there are some health indicators that are very clear in terms of the body and how much the body can cope. Cancer is real. It's a very real situation. It's not something made up. But I would ideally like if you could help him to actually see someone about it through introducing him to the idea of what it means to have counseling or therapy. Not for him, but showing him case studies of people who kicked the habit. Talk about hope, because he may be living with that guilt that he can't give it up. So show him the encouragement by showing him case studies of people who are able to do it. Especially if you know somebody in the community with whom he's close to, that always is a much better, closes the distance, much easier than a stranger. That person can begin to talk to them and inshallah get them to at least acknowledge. Again, these are sort of public sessions, so we can't give much more detail, but there's at least some thoughts. But Imad, if you want to share.
No, I think just one caution is to make sure that you don't do it in a judgmental way. I mean, especially when you're talking to parents normally, it's difficult to receive an advice from children. And we've seen it sometimes where you have a brother or sister just recently into becoming religious, and then suddenly he wants to become the sheikh of the family, basically the one who distributes advice. And you have that sometimes even among ourselves. Some brothers, every time they see you, they have an advice to give you, which becomes very annoying. It's like I'm always the one who's receiving and he's the one who's always teaching. That's what you do it actually in a sensitive way that takes into account that you're the child and he's the parent.
Jazakum khair. Is there any signs that Allah has forgiven you from a sin?
Like, is there an app or something?
A notification?
Yeah, notification. Flight notification. The scholars say that, and I could go back to Ramadan actually, probably a good example of this, is that how people say, well, was my fasting accepted? Was my ibadah accepted? That if you are able to sustain the momentum of Ramadan after Ramadan. And that's why the dua even of the companions for the 6 months approaching Ramadan was, oh Allah, help us to balighna Ramadan, help us to witness Ramadan. And then the next 6 months was to accept from us whatever we did in Ramadan. So if you find that the dua that you made, and indeed the Prophet ﷺ, said in Bukhari and in Muslim that the person whose dua, a person who makes dua will be answered except the one who is impatient and questions why wasn't my dua answered. But if you find signs of sustaining the positive trend of away from sinful behavior or away from, in this case, addictive behavior, that in itself could be a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to guide you. But you have to do additional things such as moving out of that environment completely, not having any way to sort of fall back into that trap, if you will, of addiction. And Allah says in the Quran, if you basically approach me, if you remember me, I will remember you. And the consciousness with which you come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying that I feel like a sinner, but I want to do better, and then you actually start being able to do better, that could be the sign. Allahu Alam.
One thing, Jazakallah khair. I think you said it so beautifully, especially about the fasting, that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts something from you, He will give you the chance to do more of it. And we can only hope for the best. And I think this is probably the beauty of it, is that you're almost chasing something or goal that you're not really sure whether you've attained it or not. So in other words, we're always trying our best. But however, at the same time, thinking the best of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I am whatever my servant thinks of me. أَنَا عِنْدَ ظَنِّ عَبْدِ بِي فَلْيُظِنَّ بِي عَبْدِ مَا شَاءَ. So we'll think the best of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without getting stuck in there or putting ourselves down, I'm a bad. No, we'll just think the best of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and move on. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept.
Jazakum khair. Next question. Can one be addicted to anger?
Anger?
We were both trying to calm down from that question.
I think, I don't know if you would call it, an addiction. I think it becomes probably a personality trait. But I think it's really important to keep in mind that it can be changed. In other words, a person can say, well, I'm angry by whatever, genetically and whatnot. No, I think we can change. A proof that we can change is that the commands say that we have to change. When the Prophet says, La taghdab, somebody comes to him, and he repeated 3 times, don't change, don't get angry. It means it can be done. It might be difficult, but it can be done. One hadith comes to my mind, hadith Abu Darda, where the Prophet, some they say mawquf or marfu', they said that the Prophet says, Al-ilmu bit-ta'allum, wal-hilmu bit-tahallum, wal-karamu bit-takarrum, wa ma yataharra al-khayra yu'ta, wa ma yatawaqqa ash-sharra yuqa. So he says that becoming educated is attained by pursuing an education, by studying. Becoming patient is attained by training yourself to be patient. Now look at the first segment. It says, becoming educated is attained by pursuing an education, by studying. So nobody can say, I'm genetically ignorant. I cannot help it. That's the way I'm created. I will be like that for the rest of my life. So if you believe in the first one,
Trump.
Then the second one becomes possible to you. In other words, if I believe that I can become educated, I can pursue an education with few exceptions, then I believe also that I can be patient by training myself to be patient. So it's not written in stone. It may be more difficult for some people than others. We know that for a fact. Some people, by nature, they're patient, but it can be changed. And there are ways to do that, which is another topic.
And the only thing to add would be that if you could acknowledge that the anger is starting to give you some sort of satisfaction, like you're starting to always feel like being angry is where you're like having your high, then it could move from a personality into a thing whereby you know how some people, they just never smile. Like they're just constantly angry, like just upset at the whole world. Nothing can be right, ever, right? And I don't mean to like talk about things close to home, because some of you are like, oh my God, how does he know my family, right? It could be anyone, right? We have uncles who are stationed at every masjid who are trained to be like this, right? And the kids run from them like, no, right? So if you start to enjoy it, then it's a problem. If you start to enjoy the state of anger, that's a problem. And the idea of la taghdab, awsini, ya Rasulullah, la taghdab, la taghdab, do not be overcome by the anger, actually means that condition yourself to say, you know what, calm. And by the way, on the earth, if you want to see calmness, you have to find Malaysian people. I'm not kidding. If you ever come, I mean, just go and find some Malaysian people and you will understand in the dictionary, under calm, it says see Malaysian people. And then anger, it says the rest of us, right?
Sudanese brothers.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Sweetest.
When I want to stop an addiction, I've heard two opinions. One is to quit cold turkey, and the second is to do it gradually. Which one do you both follow? Or, I don't know, these questions are weird.
What kind of addiction?
Yeah, so if it's around Thanksgiving, then turkey makes sense. But Brother Imad is saying, basically, we're talking to each other now, that it matters what the addiction is, right? So the sense of smoking, and people have done it. Actually, that's where the phrase of cold turkey was, that just a sudden stop, I'm not going back to it. And then others realized that it was very artificial to do that. The Quran weans the believers off of alcohol, progressively saying, there's some harm in it, do not use it, until ultimately the verses come, it's forbidden for you. So you have to look to see how damaging is it to that person, and then think through with the therapists and the counselors, if it's not like life-threatening, then clearly there's some leeway in terms of how to gradually come off of it. Cold turkey, the other problem also is unsustainable sometimes, that the person does it, but they come back to it and they fall so hard back into it that at that point, I don't know what you'd call it, cold something else, I mean, but it would just be problematic, yeah.
Well, one thing I just want to mention, I forgot to mention actually in my section, is that sometimes, Sheikh Farhan mentioned, some of that. There might be some programs already actually in place, even if they're not put by non-Muslims, that can be of benefit to us. I'm thinking of the 12-step program and the Alcoholic Anonymous and different shapes that would take, which they try to make it, as non-denominational as possible, that can be actually of tremendous help to us. So that's why, it doesn't only have to come through the masjid. If you find a program that can be beneficial, that you can connect with, well, go for it. Definitely by all means.
Yeah. Except instead of 12 steps, we will have odd, so we might make it 13 steps. Just to make sure Muslims feel comfortable, right?